The population of Philadelphia is about 2 million people. That makes it the sixth largest city in the U.S. Did you know that we are, in effect, adding a new city the size of Philadelphia to our country every year?
You say that like it's a bad thing. If new major urban areas were added to the country every year, that would mean new jobs and opportunities for economic growth.
That's how many illegal immigrants came into the United States in 2021 and will in 2022.
Again, you're trying to frame that as a bad thing. All those people coming over will add to the productivity of our country, as well as create demand for goods and services which will increase economic growth.
I totally get why people want to come here. I'm sure I'd do the same if I were in their shoes. In America, they can earn more money than where they're from. In America, there's the rule of law.
The rule of law sucks, frankly. It's politicians getting to boss people around through the threat of violence, often over victimless stuff.
In America, there's opportunity. And in America, there are generous government benefits, housing subsidies, free education for their kids, free medical care.
So this is something that conservatives like to do a lot. They'll use big government socialism to justify more big government socialism. Immigrants are coming here and taking advantage of all of our social services. Therefore, let's not have any more immigrants coming over. Or we could just get rid of the socialism, we could do that. I find it downright baffling that conservatives like to complain about how much of a waste social welfare is to the taxpayer, and yet in the same breath argue for immigration restrictions, which is more government.
That's the illegal immigrant side of the story. And it makes perfect sense. But what about our side of the story, the American taxpayer's side of the story?
So once again, you're taking the fact that the government forcibly takes our money, which is a perfectly valid criticism, by the way. That's a perfectly valid grievance. But instead of getting mad at the government for forcibly taking your money, you're getting mad at immigrants, who are just normal people like you and me. And all they're trying to do is come over peacefully and seek out a better life.
Do we get a say in this? Seems like we should.
So why exactly should you get to have a say on whether or not someone gets to cross an imaginary line that separates half a continent? That seems like some moral busybody control freak mentality to me.
It's estimated that Americans spend $200 billion a year to house, feed, school, and care for illegal immigrants.
So I do agree that there is a problem with woke Democrat cities using taxpayer money to support illegal immigrants. However, once again, going back to the point I made before, the correct solution to this seems to be to stop the socialism and government handouts, not to stop all immigrants from coming over altogether.
If you say that we're a rich country, that these people are fleeing poverty and war, and it's simply the compassionate thing to do for us to let them come here and stay here.
Well, not only is it the compassionate thing to do, it's also the logical and rational thing to do. According to almost every metric, our country is improved by immigration, whether it be cultural diversity or bolstering the economy.
Then I would ask, where do you draw the line? If you draw the line at all. Should we let anyone from anywhere into the country? Wouldn't that be the compassionate thing to do?
Well, yeah, sure. I don't see why people from any particular country should get special privilege to immigrate here over a person from any other country. But yeah, immigration bolsters our economy, creates jobs, makes us more culturally diverse. I don't see what the problem is.
The people who come across our southern border are overwhelmingly poor with very limited education. This isn't a judgment, it's a fact.
So the inscription at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired or your poor," not "give me your wealthy and your well off." America has always been a place where people could come and succeed as long as they work hard enough. So I don't think that someone being poor or uneducated is necessarily a reason to turn them away.
Doesn't it seem likely that these illegal immigrants would work for almost any wage to make money? Wouldn't that drive down wages for low-skilled American citizens of every race and ethnicity with whom they would be competing for jobs? What happens to those citizens, including legal immigrants, if they get priced out of the job market altogether? Is anybody thinking about them?
So in any debate about the minimum wage, conservatives will argue that wages should be determined by the free market, which I agree with, but then they'll turn around on that logic and make this bizarre argument. If immigrants were able to come here and provide cheaper labor to these companies at a lower cost, then that means that businesses would be able to lower their operating costs, ultimately passing those savings on to the consumer, which would benefit all of us. That's not to mention the fact that immigrants also create jobs by demanding goods and resources when they're here.
Violent crime is increasing across the country at an alarming rate.
That's actually a myth. Violent crime has been on a steady decrease since the 70s.
Under these circumstances, does it make sense to allow 2 million people a year into the country about whom we know nothing? We don't know if they have a criminal record, if they're carrying a disease, or anything else about them.
You do know that immigrants are less likely to commit violent crimes than native-born citizens. Also, nice to see that you're in favor of health passports, which is something conservatives said they were against during the whole COVID pandemic.
We often hear the phrase, "We are a nation of immigrants."
Well, I mean, that's because it's true. We are a nation of immigrants. Heck, our country was founded by immigrants.
But until relatively recently, the only way immigrants could enter the country was legally. Maybe you remember the scene in the classic movie Godfather 2, when young Vito Corleone comes to America from Italy. When he arrives, he has to go through Ellis Island. He has smallpox, so he's quarantined for 3 months. That was over 100 years ago. Do we do anything like that now?
You're comparing the way things were done 100 years ago to today, and that's not really accurate. Things change, of course. The fact of the matter is the social and political landscape of our country can change in those 100 years. Back in the days of Ellis Island, it may have been more practical to funnel all the immigrants through to one point. But these days, a lot more immigrants are coming to our country. So much so that our current immigration system often gets overwhelmed. Trying to come here legally has become such a bureaucratic nightmare that I don't blame people for trying to cheat the system and come illegally.
And what are we going to do with these millions of illegal immigrants once they have been here, say, 5 years or 10 years or longer? Forcibly deport them? We all know that's never going to happen.
Not only would it be impractical to forcibly deport every single immigrant, because you'd have to track down like millions of people, but it would also be highly immoral to do this. Forcibly kicking someone off half a continent just because they crossed an imaginary line without the politician's permission, there's no moral or even constitutional basis to do that.
Make them citizens? After they broke our laws to get into the country?
So you do realize that laws are basically just words on paper, right? Politicians scribbling stuff on paper doesn't actually change what's moral or ethical. When someone crosses an imaginary line, there's no victim. Therefore, there's no legitimate reason to use force against them.
We know the drug cartels control the border on the Mexican side. We know that you can't cross into America without paying them a sizable bribe. We know that this bribe money adds up to millions, maybe billions of dollars. Doesn't this mean that we are helping to make the cartels richer and more powerful? What do you think the cartels do with this money? Give it to the Red Cross? Or use it to further corrupt Mexico's police and government officials, not to mention buy weapons or anything else they want?
So I agree that it's wrong for the cartels to force bribe money out of people in order to cross the border. However, I don't think that's a good reason for America to forcibly stop immigrants from coming in. Two wrongs don't make a right. And instead of blaming immigrants for this problem, how about we do something about the cartels?
We also know that the cartels use migrants to smuggle in drugs like fentanyl that are killing our young people, that these same cartels engage in human trafficking, especially of young women. Aren't we encouraging this criminal activity by allowing illegal immigration to proceed virtually unchecked?
So you do realize that the war on drugs makes drugs artificially profitable and therefore encourages this type of criminal activity. Again, instead of just blaming immigrants, how about we deal with the actual problem and get rid of the war on drugs?
If you add a new Philadelphia worth of illegal immigrants to our population every year, is it reasonable to suggest that this will alter the character of the nation?
This is just meaningless fear-mongering. What does the character of the nation even mean? America has had immigrants coming over for literal centuries, and the character of the nation, whatever that's even supposed to mean, doesn't seem like it's been harmed at all.
These are people, after all, who are raised in a different culture with different traditions and values than ours.
So what if people bring their different cultures and traditions over here? Like, who cares? I think that cultural diversity is part of what makes our country such an interesting place. You're talking to someone who likes Korean hot pot and Ukrainian folk music.
We will either change them or they will change us.
This seems like a false dichotomy. Isn't it possible that I could perhaps embrace certain aspects of other cultures while still recognizing my own?
Which do you think is more likely to happen? One reason countries have borders and immigration policies is to preserve their national culture. A country without borders is not a country.
This is something that conservatives like to argue a lot. Well, you can't have a country with open borders. First of all, why not? And second of all, even if that is true, then why even have countries in the first place? As Larkin Rose would say, countries are basically just human livestock plantations. Why not just let everyone live free?
So isn't it just common sense to want to protect our borders? Why do people say walls don't work?
Because they don't. A majority of illegal immigrants are visa overstays. That is, they entered the country legally but simply stayed longer than they were allowed to stay. So a wall wouldn't stop them from coming in. A wall also wouldn't stop people who come here by boat or plane.
Countries all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, have border walls.
Border walls seem to mostly be an American concept. I can't think of a whole lot of other countries that have them other than Israel. For Israel, a border wall is a necessity because they're surrounded by countries that literally ideologically oppose their existence. Also, a border wall is much more manageable when your entire country is the size of New Jersey.
They work.
Yeah, border walls work. I don't have to provide any facts or evidence that they work. I just have to simply exclaim that they work, and that's all I need to prove my point.
Why should our border wall be any different?
Because this wall would have to be tall enough not to be climbed over, deep enough not to be dug under, and thick enough not to be broken through. I would have to be this way for the entire length of the US-Mexico border, which is like 2,000 miles. And it would have to somehow magically be able to stop visa overstays or people who come here by boat or plane.
If we're willing to send $40 billion to a country in Eastern Europe to defend its borders, why are we unwilling to spend half of that to defend our own border by building an effective border wall?
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
So apparently this genius is trying to conflate a foreign army forcibly coming into your country to take it over and people peacefully crossing an imaginary line to seek out a better life for themselves. Yeah, somehow I feel like it's putting a square peg in a round hole.
We have a border, but we don't guard it.
So we do technically guard the border, it's just that guarding the border is such a futile effort given how many immigrants come across it and how long the border is.
And we have immigration laws, but we don't enforce them.
Again, who gives a shit about your stupid immigration laws? Laws are just words written on paper by politicians that don't actually change what's moral or what's right.
For all practical purposes, our borders are open. How many more cities the size of Philadelphia are you willing to admit before you say, enough?
So yeah, this video doesn't have a whole lot of substance to it. It's basically just a bunch of fear-mongering about brown people crossing an imaginary line, not hurting anyone. So until next time, this has been Floss Possum making stupidity play dead. Everyone take care.